Hi, this is Mark Wade of Berkshire Hathaway, Fox and Roach Realtors, CenterCityCondos.com. In this podcast, I'd just like to talk to you about assessments and how they might affect value in resale. Okay, it goes like this. When a buyer enters into an agreement of sale, if there's any assessment on the property, they need to be disclosed up front. At that point, they may be negotiated between the buyer and seller. Generally speaking, if there's an assessment, the seller generally will pick that up prior to closing. But again, it is a negotiable. A lot of times, if a building has a very high assessment, and let's say that assessment might be an extra $300 or $400 a month for the next 7 or 8, 9 years, it's not unheard of. Generally, what I see happening is it tends to stagnate values and demand in that building. Not always. There are always exceptions, but I remember the Plaza at 1901 Walnut, this was years ago, they had a fairly large assessment, and it was not an appreciable, there was not an assessment that somebody could appreciate, meaning it wasn't like they were redoing their hallways or redoing the lobby or the entranceway or anything like that. They were doing electrical behind the walls in the basement. They were doing elevator motor replacements and the things that buyers really can't see, that they don't appreciate. As a result of this fairly intense assessment, we saw values and demand stagnate for about a 2 to 3 year period at the Plaza, which is not uncommon. I'm not picking out the Plaza, not picking on them or picking them out especially, but the reality is, if there's a large assessment, especially in one that can't visually be appreciated, it has a tendency to, the demand and value can both drop on that building, or for the units in that building, and that's not uncommon. We see that a lot. Now, there are some buildings that don't have special assessments. Those are buildings that put a significant portion of their monthly fees away so that they plan on anything coming down the road. They already have the money socked away for it. There are other buildings in town, and one notable building on Rittenhouse Square, a very prominent building, in fact, that basically keeps no money in their kitty. So if there is a need for an improvement, they just assess everybody. Well, my guess is that everybody in that building has a lot of money, so it really doesn't matter whether they're taking it, monthly, they're billing you monthly, or it's just one lump sum. Random thoughts about or facts about assessments. Some assessments on buildings can be financed over a 6, 7, or 8 year period, depending on how the building sets that up. Assessments are negotiable, can be paid by the buyer, and then if you enter into an agreement of sale on a unit and it's in the middle of the building's in the middle of an assessment, the assessment is negotiable, though usually it's the seller who will pick that up, and the buyer will put that into the agreement of sale. Assessments are like haircuts and cars and clothing. Things need to be maintained, and they're maintained in buildings through assessment. So in the long run, assessment is good for retaining value for a unit. But while that assessment is in place, we might find that demand and resale value for specific units within that building tend to drop or stagnate during that period. Not always. There are always exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, and we have seen it in the past, where demand and value just stagnate until that assessment is done. Or if the seller decides he's going to pay that assessment right up front, and the realtor is smart enough to put that in the ML saying, seller to pick up all assessments prior to close. That's one way you can avoid really having a property that just stagnates on the market due to a very large assessment. So anyway, this is Mark Wade, CenterCityCondos.com, just letting you know about what I know about assessments. Oh, one final note. If indeed a building is talking about a future improvement, that's not an assessment, because all buildings are always talking about future improvements. However, if it's voted on and agreed to and somehow recorded, that's an assessment. So even if it hasn't started to be collected yet, that's still an assessment. So just know that you could enter into a building where, and all buildings, again, they all talk about what's going to happen in the future and whether they'll have to have an assessment or they'll take the money out of the kitty. Whatever the case is, unless it's agreed upon and recorded, it's not an assessment. So there you go. Anyway, questions, comments, or concerns, pick up the phone, push the buttons on the front, 267-237-3404. Thank you.